So you're an interesting character because you came across my radar, not because you were involved with one of my favorite organizations in the world, the Santa Fe Institute, but instead because you wrote an article that was so edgy that you got booted off of Facebook. And so that actually, I'm like a moth to flame for this, and I want to know all about this. So tell the listeners what it is that you wrote and why did Facebook kick you off of their platform for it?
Well, as it turned out, I don't think it was anything I wrote. It was probably, is our best thinking, a miscalculation by the AIs that they've let loose looking for bad guys, in their mind, QAnons or what have you. It turned out that this algorithm, which we believe the parameters were changed sometime on Friday, about 10 days ago, booted all three of the admins for a very interesting Facebook group that I am one of the admins for, called the gameb group. And that is a community of about 3,000 people who are exploring the operating system of the future for humanity in a very calm, theoretical way. We don't allow any discussion of contemporary, team blue, team red politics. We don't talk about current events. And we have a 7-person moderator team that keeps things from getting ugly. So it's like, what? Anyway, they blasted all three of us simultaneously. At first, I thought it might have been something I posted, but it turned out it was probably an algorithm that had been tuned on QAnon and somehow found our form of thinking and exploration and the fact that we have our own vocabulary and that we're always trying to take our theory and compare it with data and practice in some superficial way, probably has some statistical similarities, oddly enough, to the cue ball, the screwball QAnon stuff. And so they whacked us. And of course, typical Facebook Kafka-esque governance didn't tell us why. And even better, there's 3 different levels of ban. We got the highest, the death penalty. When you go to the appeal process, it says, this may not be, cannot be appealed and may not be, and cannot be reversed, right? So this is the ultimate wacko, right? And so we went over to Twitter and started posting. And, fortunately, our community on Facebook's about 3,000. Our community on Twitter is probably about 10,000. Plus, we got lots of friends, some of them fairly influential. And a fairly large shitstorm emerged. Literally millions of people heard about this. And, of course, it also turned out we have a pretty well-connected network of folks who are friends, and at least 4 intervene on our behalf with employees at Facebook of medium level, and lo and behold, less than 10 hours later, the ban was reversed. But that these son of a guns bothered to tell us? Of course not in their Kafka-esque fashion. We were actually on a conference call, the whole moderation team, 7 people. And one of them happened to get an email from a friend. Hey, it looks like you're back on Facebook. So we all quickly hit our computer. Sure enough, we were. And so that is the screwy story of the banning of the gameb 3 and their reinstatement with no apology, no notification, nothing.
Well, so you bring up like such many, many interesting points, not least of which are this world that you live in, that you're building barns on rented land when you're building a group on Facebook. And you could build it all up. You could be doing everything right. And somebody else somewhere far away, maybe not even a person, can flip a switch and have it all shut down. So now that you've gone through this Kafka-esque experience, what do you do going forward to make sure that you're, don't continue to build barns on rented land?
Goddamn right. Actually, fortunately, I had smelled that this could happen. So I've been looking for a year for a potential private home, basically a white label platform that had the functionality we wanted and was easy enough for normal people to use, right? Because we have a lot of people who are not technoids, that are people that are interested in a new way of living. A lot of people interested in living in a regenerative fashion. They're interested in, real community, et cetera. So tech isn't necessarily their thing. So we didn't want a difficult, pinheaded kind of platform. And I've been been doing this for 40 years. I was literally worked for the world's first online commercial service called The Source back in 1980. So I have a pretty good idea of what you actually need to build a mass audience. And so I finally found one. And in early December, I set up a potential Bolt home for gameb. Just set it up basically, tested it out, and put some branding on it, colors, logos, did a couple test subgroups, and convinced myself that it looked pretty good. So we got banned on Friday, let back on Friday night. By Sunday, I actually had cleaned up the new home, and we had brought in 40 testers from the community who were started working, on it, make sure it works. Is this simple enough? Can we understand it, et cetera? What do we need to, what decisions do we need to make, et cetera, on the tunings, the options? And we've been going through that process now for about a little over a week, 9 days. Tonight, we are opening the new gameb home for a soft launch to our Facebook community. And I expect we will very quickly have hundreds and soon thousands. And then if it all holds together, which I think it will, in a week, we're going to announce it to the world. So we immediately decided this was one step too far from these people. We knew it all along. I mean, as I said, I've been doing this for 40 years. And, I love your analogy as a farmer myself. You don't want to build a barn on rented land, right? You might, plant some hay or a little sudeck, something like that, maybe some soybeans, but I'll be damned if I'm going to build a barn on rented land. So here we were building a barn on rented land. Love that analogy. Now we got our own land, and now we'll build a much bigger and better barn. And literally should be, I would say, substantially migrated off in another 3 or 4 weeks. So
I think that this is the direction of the entire world. And I can remember, so I used to travel around the world before COVID hit and give talks to groups. And one of the things that I was always predicting was this thing we called the social media archipelago, which is that eventually when you have too much pressure on any one social network group that it have only a certain political bent or only certain ideas can be there, well, people will leave and they'll go get on their own island, and that island will be so distinct and so separate from the other social media platforms, even though they're living on an island that's maybe just across the river from somebody, they won't even know or hear or see anything from them. And I think that we will watch culture splinter out in a whole bunch of different ways, differently than the way that social media has played out so far. I mean, so far, social media has been a centralizing force, and I think we're going to watch an explosion of a decentralizing force going forward.
And of course, this is a return to the way the online world was, right? And that the internet was for a long time, because it used to be that one of the most powerful use cases for the online world, and this goes back before the internet, was what we called affinity groups. One of the examples I like to use, CompuServe was the big power in the middle and late 80s, right? And there were hundreds, maybe thousands of what they called special interest groups. And one of them I happen to know was a group for aficionados of antique restored Packard automobiles, right?
And that's highly specific.
Yeah, there was, a couple hundred people on there, amazingly, because I guess the same kind of nerdy people that like to restore an old Packard were just the same kind of be running a TRS-80 or a Commodore 64 or something on, character mode CompuServe in 1986. And, they were very distinct from the antique Cadillac people, and they hated each other, right? Because Cadillac and Packard were the two competing luxury brands back in the 30s and 40s and early 50s. And so these were very distinct, totally culturally different. And once in a while, one would try to invade the other, and there'd be a big shitstorm. It was pretty funny. So, and then I think about it, prior to about 2004, 2005, a lot of the internet was also that way, specialty websites for all kinds of things. And then the blog phenomena, right? People had their own voice. And then there was multi-author blogging where, a half dozen of bloggers have a similar point of view would put up the equivalent of an online magazine. And so that was actually, the heart of the internet from, say, 1991, when it first became more or less legal for consumers, up till maybe 2003, 2004, when the earliest social media kind of commingled, strange new platforms emerged with things like Friendster, and then what the hell was the famous one? MySpace.
MySpace, yeah.
That, total blown opportunity. They should have been the winner, but they just made too many mistakes. And then Facebook came in and snuck in and won most of the marbles. But there was a bunch of other ones. Orkut was out there. Of course, Reddit was out there in that time frame. And so this attempt to interweave everybody into this indistinct ball of yarn is relatively new, only about 15 years old. And so I think it's not at all a bad prediction that many people will find, particularly in this new crazy environment where the platforms have decided they're going to become censors. Why do we need to be censored? And even though we're not bad guys at all, you read the gameb group, you'll see that we were definitely erroneously targeted. We're not political in any short-term sense, very political in the very long-term sense. But why should we put up with that? Why should we put up with the vagaries of some algorithm let loose without proper testing? And who knows, when we start getting more radical, which we may well in the future, then we would certainly be at risk of being snuffed. And in fact, I'm working on an essay called Facebook's War on Thought. And the warning is anyone who's actually thinking about new things should get the hell off Facebook. If all you're doing is using rubber stamps to repeat conventional wisdom, probably Facebook, Twitter's okay for you. But if you're actually doing fundamental thought, heterodox ideas about how to make the world better, don't do it on those rented plots of land, because they're going to get you sooner or later.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.